I'd like to begin with Ambassador Arthur Link. Ambassador Link, even as the White House maintains that its wholehearted support for Israel continues, fact of the matter is that recent days, if not weeks, have made it quite evident that there are growing differences, or shall we say there's a sharp divergence of views between Israel and its staunchest ally, the United States, particularly with regard to how Israel is carrying on with this war. There are multiple issues here that we can discuss one by one. Let's begin with the message that Jake Sullivan, the National Security Adviser of the United States, had for Israeli leaders, including Prime Minister Netanyahu. He tells him that Israel needs to do a lot more to protect civilian lives. The US is clearly pushing Israel to shift to a more precise phase of military operations, again, so as to reduce the number of civilian casualties. And Jake Sullivan once again said that the US wants to see results on Israel's intent to avoid civilian casualties in Gaza. In a sense, a reminder of what President Biden said earlier this week. In no uncertain terms and publicly, he stated that Israel is fast losing global support because of the indiscriminate bombing of Gaza. So my question to you is that even as Israel says it's determined to continue with this war, even if it takes months, in the face of growing international isolation and mounting calls for a ceasefire, for how long can Israel afford to ignore what its strongest ally, the United States, has to say, how President Biden feels about this war? Because one, Israel needs the United States, and two, the Biden administration is evidently uncomfortable with what's going on in Gaza now.
Hi, Nia. It's good to be with you again. I disagree with the premise. I think that the picture you're painting, that the United States and Israel are not mostly aligned and mostly understand each other and are in deep conversation and in dialogue, is actually the situation. The United States and Israel both understand that Hamas is the aggressor here, that Hamas needs to be removed from the picture for Palestinians as much as Israelis. We understand that humanitarian efforts are key and have been for a long time. Israel, I don't know, have you ever heard of an army that puts out maps, shares with the general public, and says, we're going to be attacking in this neighborhood today and that neighborhood tomorrow, and it tells it before? It's almost like you're playing a board game and already telling the other side what cards you have. We're giving advance notice. We're allowing for humanitarian aid. We're encouraging civilians to get out of harm's way. I don't know of other countries that do of all those things. Of course, civilians are being killed, and that's a great tragedy. But why are they being killed? Because Hamas is using them as shields. Hamas is using hospitals. Hamas is using schools. Hamas is using homes to build their tunnels under while they keep their officers safe. They're putting their public into harm's way to cause Indian television to say, oh gosh, the Israelis are killing civilians. That's exactly what Hamas wants. The question is what would you do? How do you eliminate Hamas? Israel, together with our partner, the United States, is making every effort to eliminate Hamas and to protect civilians and to allow for humanitarian aid, more than I think anybody else would do in the world.
Okay. Israel insists it's doing everything in its power to protect civilian lives. However, I am not sure that is a very convincing argument for the rest of the world. And now it is quite evident that the Biden administration also seems to have a disagreement with that. But Irina Sukuman, let me come to you now. President Biden says one day Israel is fast losing global support because of the indiscriminate bombing of Gaza. Antony Blinken reminds Prime Minister Netanyahu every third day, you need to do more to protect civilian lives. There is a gap between your intent and the reality on the ground. Jake Sullivan travels to Tel Aviv, tells Prime Minister Netanyahu, you need to draw a timetable because this operation needs to start winding down. But Prime Minister Netanyahu says, we are determined to continue fighting Hamas until we achieve, quote unquote, absolute victory. The defense minister of Israel says this war could go on for months together and nothing will stop us. The question simply is, who is going to believe that as of today, the United States and Israel are indeed on the same page?
Thank you so much for having me back. Well, I will start by pointing out that we are talking about a presidential election year here in the United States. So President Biden has to be addressing the interests of many of his constituencies when he deals with public messaging. It's quite as simple as that. So a lot of the public messaging is not necessarily aimed at Israel. This is aimed at everybody else. And the U.S. Has to show that it's pushing to get the conflict resolved and to save lives in Gaza. The second issue is that the messaging from the Biden administration also seems to be mixed. Jake Sullivan is pushing Israel for a timeline to wind down the conflict. On the other hand, John Kirby explicitly said that the US does not want Israel to put timestamps on the conflict because it will give Hamas an unfair advantage, and those points are at tension with each other, and perhaps the administration should figure out which one is it. But the third issue is that I think everyone is in agreement that both the US and Israel are on the same page. They both want to minimize the loss of Palestinian lives. But how to do that effectively? First, I don't think going along with figures coming from Hamas will do anyone any favors. Hamas is not a credible organization. They have lied and distorted figures repeatedly. They have used actors to show incidents that did not actually occur, and they somehow always manage to find and count tens of thousands of victims, all inevitably women and children, whereas Israel took as an entire month to count the 12 to 1400 victims that were killed by Hamas on October 7th. There is another point here, and that concerns Palestinians themselves. As we have seen from footage, the Hamas operatives have been involved in preventing Palestinians from gaining access to international humanitarian aid. They literally attack and beat Palestinian civilians. The merciful thing in this situation is to not let them do it. The more Israel kills those operatives, and not just the symbolic high-ranking figures who are hiding underground, but the people holding civilians hostage, the better it is for Palestinians and the more lives it will save. Finally, and I'd like to make an important point of it, US has never put a timeline on its own operations, defensive operations, in response to attacks on US interests, whether they were in Afghanistan, in Iraq, or anywhere else in the world. I don't think it's fair to expect Israel to put these timelines or to tell them how to run a security operation when US has failed to provide accurate intelligence about Hamas activity before the events in question. Just as Israel has failed in its intelligence activity, so has the US. And now we are in this horrible position, all of us, but it means we need to take the time to do things right, to figure out where those operatives are hiding and who will hold the power if those top echelons are eliminated. If Israel does not eliminate mid-level officers in the Hamas ranks, the mid-level lieutenants and fighters, they will simply take over as soon as the end of the war concludes, and this is not what US wants. Furthermore, Israel is not required to put its troops in harm's way to get its fighters killed just for the optics of the international opinion. What the US is suggesting to use very small groups of fighters to target these leaders in Gaza right now would simply be suicidal because the environment they are operating in is not conducive to that type of strategy. We just had an incident the other day when a group of IDF officers was targeted, ambushed, and 9 people were killed in one incident. Unless the US wants more such incidents to occur and to actually weaken IDF to asymmetrical warfare, which is what Hamas specializes in, this is not a wise strategy to pursue.
Okay, you've made a series of interesting points. You say that the US has never set timelines for itself when it is, fighting for its own national interest. Therefore, is it fair for it to impose any deadlines on Israel? Well, some would say America's duplicity is well known, but then America acts like Big Brother, as we all know, and Big Brother is not dictated to, but certainly likes to dictate to others what they should do and how they should conduct their affairs. And the reality is, Israel does need the United States of America in this war. Ambassador Manjul Seth, let me ask you this question. Yes, we all know that President Biden has to face an election next year, and it's probably going to be a tough one against his predecessor, Donald Trump. But even as America continues to support Israel's military campaign in Gaza, fact of the matter is that the growing unease within the Biden administration is quite evident, especially in light of the rising number of deaths in Gaza. Therefore, my question is, would it be simplistic to say that President Biden is just indulging in posturing and playing to his domestic constituency? Because many would argue that there is a growing unease, because not only Israel is facing international isolation at the moment, the United States of America is now facing the heat for its unstinting support to Israel's military campaign as the death toll keeps rising in Gaza.
Absolutely, you're right, Neha. The problem is that the US does, have some degree of doublespeak in all its actions. And as you mentioned very rightly, it is the big brother in many ways. So it would definitely want to have its writ sort of agreed to by everyone. But at the same time, while I think, in my view, while everyone is talking about Israel, Israel needs to stop this and create a ceasefire for some time at least, and prevent and stop this and make it all targeted, the killings and all that. I also feel there should be pressure brought upon the Hamas leadership and through Qatar, through all their supporters, to make them also stop and leave and leave the people, not stop using them as hostages, stop using them as shields. And if Hamas would release all the hostages, I'm sure there would be a solution found. Why would they keep on holding on to them if their intent is to end this war? Obviously, there seems to be, in my view, an intent that from the Hamas side as well to keep provoking Israel and to let this war continue indefinitely. The US, of course, as again mentioned by you very rightly, is in election mode already. Election year is coming, and so they would want to, for their domestic constituency, definitely, and world and the world opinion as well is tilting now against the US support and against Israel's actions because of the huge number of civilian deaths, and some way should be found to reduce civilian death and to ensure that they are kept safe and humanitarian aid and food and medicines reach them. So there has to be a way found to stop this the current continuing bombardment, and to find some ways of isolating the so-called leadership of the Hamas. And if that, I think, can be done through intelligence, of course, and by also putting pressure on their funders, their supporters, I feel if the supporters, if the support ends for them, if material support ends for these, for this group, I feel there is some chance of moving towards a peaceful settlement. But as of now, things are going, I think it seems very difficult, even though the US is concerned and US is trying to put pressure, but I think, I don't think anything is going to go in anywhere.
Okay, it's probably not ending anytime soon. This is a very, very complex situation that we have on our hands. And of course, ideally, the whole world would want Hamas to fall in line. But then the trouble is, you know, whether you expect Qatar or anyone else to put pressure on them, this is a terror organization that you're talking about.